is 5:30. Let's call the work session to order. Up first is the Pier City cohort review.
Okay, so Mayor and Council, this is a follow-up from our last work session in July. Just gonna try to get the bottom part out here on the screen for you. The council reviewed Pier Cities, wanted to get some information on cities that were considered, but ultimately weren't proposed to the council. Again, we added some other information. We wanted to look at 2030 population and then 2023 tax rate for those cities. And again, one of the things that we stressed is like the information and what is collected is ultimate, and how it's used is ultimately up to the council. It doesn't bind you to make a certain decision or use the average. As you'll see in the next agenda item when it comes to council pay, it's informative, but you can use that information however you'd like. So I don't want the council to feel like they're in any way locked in. And if there's a certain situation where you feel like another city has information that you're interested in, we can certainly add those or take other cities out. I think what we're aiming to do here is establish a set of cities that when you see them, you won't feel compelled to say, you know, why did you include Corcoran on this one? That there's basically a baseline of cities that you're looking at, and then you can add or take out depending upon the issue that you're interested in studying. So happy to answer any questions and take any feedback and direction from the council.
Questions, comments? I like it. I don't have anything.
That's exactly what we asked for. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I appreciate your comments that we can use this how we want, because I'm not sure why Waconia is on this list. It really just seems to be an outlier. But we can take it as an outlier as we use that data compared to the other ones that you have here.
Eric?
The last go around, we were proposing adding to, dropping to, where's that?
So you see that Albertville and Corcoran are the ads in Medina,
Sorry.
and Rockford. They're just not highlighted.
Got it. Yep. No, I don't have any additional questions.
I like this. So these are all kind of cities that I'm familiar with. I think it's good. I think there'll always be outliers, Troy. I like Waconia because the last few years I feel like we've hopscotched them almost every other year in tax rate. So I think they're kind of the Carver County community that I have in my sights for tax rate. But I think regardless of the topic, there'll always be maybe one that's wildly off. You know, maybe if we're looking at population, this isn't a direct match to kind of our group or who we consider
it is
cohort,
not
but
their criteria that we have in these columns.
unless we find the Carver clone, you know, that's out there somewhere, I don't think that we're gonna have an apples to apples 100%.
I don't know anything about any of the other towns besides Victoria, Waconia, and Jordan. I don't know anything about them, so I can't judge whether they're good on here or not. I'd have to do more research, but again, I appreciate the city's recommendation.
And I am familiar with Corcoran and the Alberta market, so I feel really comfortable with those two being in here.
Okay.
All right, I think you've got 5 thumbs up.
Okay, thank you.
Next, number 3, council pay.
Yeah, this is a follow-up again. There we go. Of conversation, just asking the city council if they wanted to have a discussion on council pay. It's adopted by ordinance, so any changes that you would make would become effective after the next general election, which would be in the second meeting of November in 2024. So if you'd want to make changes, what we'd have to do is propose it as an ordinance and then have it come to a council meeting. If it's adopted, then it would start that process moving to the November 2024. So using those same peer cities that you saw, here you can see Albertville through Waconia, different pay schedules for mayor and council. And one of the things that the council asked is for annual budget. We didn't get a response from Albertville, but as you can see, there are varied amounts. There are some cities that use kind of what we use as far as kind of, I would call it almost a salary base, where you get paid for all the meetings. There are some that use base for the council meetings, but then you get paid for each additional meeting, whether it's some type of committee that you're on, or Parks Commission, Planning Commission, HPC, that sort of thing. The city of Carver was previously on that model, and then I would say maybe about a half dozen years ago moved to the model that we use today. Just to kind of get the conversation started, we came up with a number of scenarios for the council to discuss and consider. The model reflects kind of an 80% pay of council to the mayor using that ratio. But again, we left an other scenario should you think that there's something that wasn't considered that you'd like to have discussed. And you might not be in a position where you even want to move this forward, but hopefully this gives you enough to have a conversation amongst yourselves on next steps. Happy to answer any questions.
All right. I will kind of kick off this discussion. I remember when Brent kind of soft sounded this the last time. Eric, you were like, "Oh, I don't know that I want to do that." And Christy can vouch, that was me 100% when we did this 6 years ago. It was like 3 months after we were both elected to our first term, and I was like, "I'm not in this for the money." Like,
It's kind of an uncomfortable thing to like.
good, yeah, like it's an absolutely uncomfortable thing. But that was 6 years ago, probably 7 years ago.
And before
now.
that, we had not raised it in 18 years. I believe.
Yeah.
It was something crazy, like 15, 18 years.
So I get it, there's like this Minnesota modest, and also like we're raising our own pay, and the optics that go with that are icky, right? No matter how you look at it. But because this is something that I don't anticipate us going over for the next, first of all, it won't take place for another 18 months, or it won't be in effect if we vote for something for another 18 months, because it has to be for the next after the next election cycle. I think we're due, and I know that we all work hard. I am just advocating from my position, but I think the pay per meeting is just a lot of needless work put on staff. I think that that's tricky, and the accounting is hard, so I am not in favor of going back to that. I would like to advocate for scenario B, and the way that I came up with that is, I say this with a little asterisk of my math will absolutely need to be checked, but I think if you look at what, from the mayor's position, what we're making, if we look at the increases that we put towards the pay scale in the last just even 4 years, that would get us at $6,500 a year for the mayor's pay scale. And again, I really took a narrow, perhaps selfish view of this, just looking at the mayor's salary. But I think that puts us right now today about $6,500, knowing that we don't do this all the time. I'm in favor of scenario B.
I'm sorry, I'm missing how you got to 7,000, which is scenario B.
Sure, it's a bump.
From current,
So if you figure, according to my math, and the email that I sent Brent didn't include the math, but so $5,500 plus a 3% increase. What did we do last year? 7 to 6% going into
since
2024.
this was last put in place, you're saying?
This is just for the last 3 years that I could remember
okay,
off the top of my head. So that takes us to $6,500, again, just for the mayor's salary. And
Okay,
because I don't have all of those years accounted for, and because this won't take place until 2025, that's why I'm thinking scenario B is the best, looking long-term, knowing that this isn't something that we do once a term. It's been my experience that we're doing it no more than once every other term.
Well, since I'm the one that reacted in the meeting, I'll share my thoughts on this.
Sure.
From a mayor pay perspective, we're 10% less than our peer cities. So I agree that should be adjusted. And I've certainly now been around a few months to see the difference in workload, at least from my perception in what I do for the city. So I'm comfortable with that level B. For myself as a council member, yeah, there's a little piece of me, well, there's a lot of me that is reluctant to vote myself a raise. So if these are separate items, one for the mayor, one for council, I'm going to vote yes for the mayor receiving an increase. Council is 6% lower than the average. I don't feel like I should stand in anyone's way, but it's a hard thing for me to vote myself an increase, especially as I need the years to get acclimated. I also want to be sure that the money that we use for an increase in ourselves doesn't come at the expense of using dollars towards training opportunities, the things we do with League of Minnesota Cities. That to me is more valuable than an increase in pay, and I want to be sure that those dollars are still there. So I'd advocate for dollars that would go to an increase for me being used for furthering education. That's my feeling about it, but I'm going to advocate for the $7,000 for the mayor.
And I'm gonna agree with you, Courtney, with the scenario B. Because this isn't going into effect until 2025, we've still got even more time as inflation goes up. Council, by history, has not done a lot of raises, and I don't think we're out of line in being, fairly, if we're looking at our peer cities, that gets us, and now remember the number that they have on the slide before is a stagnant number of today. We don't know what they may increase also as they get to 2025. I am in favor of both, and Eric, you are new to the council, and the mayor does a lot of work, but when there is a hot issue that comes up, our workload gets a little bit heavier because we get contacted a little bit more. So I really think that scenario B, especially because we've got that little bit of time lag before it takes effect for everybody, mayor and council, would be my preference.
Can you remind me, and again, you said right in the beginning of your term when we did this, can you refer to the year that it was last changed?
2017.
I'll go with that. That's hard to
That
come.
sounds directionally correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, while you're talking, I can look that up. I don't remember the.
So we voted for it in 2017. It would have gone into effect
Yeah.
in beginning of 2019.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it, okay. So your logic, Courtney, on purely looking at inflation kind of from today through that period makes sense to me. Again, I think Waconia is an outlier and they have the highest pay in here, so I don't kind of buy the pure average. But I like your perspective about looking at inflation over time, so I'll support B.
I would also support B. I would like to know if it was 6 years and then what the other, how many years before that, just to be able to answer if somebody says, well, do you do this every 2 years? No, we haven't.
It was
History of
13.
doing it.
It was
like 6 years.
It was 2017 is when the council last changed their pay, and then it became effective, would have become effective in 2018 after that general election.
Do you know when it was before that? The time before?
At the time,
When it was or
And
when
I'm-
it was? I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
When it was. And I
When
just
it
wanted
Yeah.
to prepare myself to answer for
let
people.
me,
No, this
check
doesn't
here.
happen. On average, it looks
Mhm.
like maybe 6 years.
While he checks, I also want to add, I think I took a very narrow approach, first of all. I think the other thing that's important is this work, regardless, mayor, council, takes time, right? And I think a lot of us have varying degrees of flexibility in our schedule and certainly sometimes our personal lives where we're able to give a little more and participate in events that are at the middle of the day on a Tuesday. And we're probably all salaried. I think when you raise the price or the salary for folks, I think that opens the pool for folks, because if we are making, if there's an hourly worker who would have to take time away from a job to participate in some of the duties that are involved in this work, it could make them not want to run. So thinking broader than just the 5 of us who are sitting in these seats, for whomever would want to do this, hopefully it would open up the pool of candidates by offering a little bit more pay and hopefully to compensate for those who wouldn't necessarily be able to slip away in the middle of the day like sometimes we do. Does that make sense? Is that enough time? No?
Yeah, Lori, it's
It
not.
won't change my answer or my thought right now.
Yeah.
It's just in the future, I wanna be able to respond to it, if that question was brought to me.
It was a long time.
Yeah,
I remember like
Oh.
Mike Webb being like,
We have the year as 2017, I'm just looking up at the pay structure.
Oh, okay. I
Oh,
thought we were.
no,
but you're
I'm looking at
asking
the
for
year
the year
before.
before, the last
Or like,
year
right,
before
Oh.
when was
2017.
this?
That is, yeah, we don't have that data, we'd have to go into the minute books and try to find
Like,
that.
before your time?
Yes. It's only
Well-
been increased that I can remember once.
Yeah.
since I've
I bet
started.
it's in the packet from 2017, because I'm
Oh,
sure that
it
it was
probably
teed up.
referenced,
Yeah,
it
it
was.
is referenced in there because we talked a lot about it.
I feel like we're all trying to like picture, okay, where was the meeting held? Was it the basement of the
We were in the
old
church
city
by then.
hall?
We were in the church.
We were in the church.
In the folding tables. in the
Yeah.
back. So, okay, I hear 5 thumbs up for option B.
Yes.
Okay. What are next steps then, Brent?
We'll have a ordinance drafted, I have to confirm with the city attorney if we need to have a public hearing, if not, if we need to have a public hearing, it would be at your first meeting in September, if we don't, it'd be an ordinance for your consideration at your next meeting in August, which would be the 21st.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 4, bluff ordinance review. Ms. Fenn.
Thank you. So tonight we're gonna take a look at our bluff ordinance. Most recently, we talked about this on April 4th, 2022. Dave gave a big overview of what our bluff ordinance was, what it does. It felt like it was something we were talking a lot about because Brookview is moving through the planning process, which is a project that obviously has some bluffs. We'll talk about that in detail a little bit. But it felt like a topic that we all could use a little refresher on. At that time, the council made some requests for some additional information that's included in the packet. Our bluff ordinance lives in the zoning section of the city code, which is chapter 50. It defines tier setbacks, what uses you can use, what you can't, and it provides protections during planning. So we have an example of the buffering signage that we've adopted fairly recently. So we have some information of what we used to do, how we've evolved, and how we apply it now. So what the bluff protection ordinance does at its very core is that it reduces dangers of erosion, increased visibility, and natural character of the land, which is a function of the city, the health, safety, and welfare of citizens. So protection of the bluffs allows them to continue as they are, not cause erosion, create natural resource disasters that can happen with serious erosion. So there are several bluffs in town. Most recently, we've seen projects development, the Bluffs, which is obviously bluffy, River Bluff Estates. Hawthorne Ridge was a big one, and then Brookview. So Hawthorne Ridge is the D.R. Horton project. It's Ironwood Drive, Redmond Drive, where the city took a substantial amount of acreage of bluffy property, which has allowed us to preserve it, and then Brookview took a similar approach, taking a significant amount of the property in city outlot. So the bluff ordinance has 2 tiered setbacks, tier 1 and tier 2. Each one is a 25-foot setback, so 50 feet in total from a bluff. And our code calls for no principal or accessory structure within either of those tiers. There's some flexibility for removal or alteration in vegetation, grading, and filling in the tier 1 setback. And then fences, walls, stairways, lift, landings are permitted with staff review and a conditional use permit. At the April 4th, 2022 meeting, one of the requests from council was to see if there had been recent conditional use permits that have been applied for and if they've been approved or not, so I have that information. And then as with most things, there's some flexibility if a project is within a PRD. So we talked a lot about during the Brookview approval process of that trail, the nature trail that we tried to slide in the outlet. And since that was in a PRD, we had some flexibility with work that could be done within a bluff. We weren't anticipating any grading on that property, but there would have been some minimal tree clearing that could have happened since it was a PRD with a bluff.
Can you clarify, decks, are those accessory structures?
No, not usually because they're attached to a principal structure, so they typically have to meet the principal structure setbacks.
I have a question, that fourth bullet point, what's lifts landing?
Lifts and landing, so like a deck, when you come off, if you land onto a concrete pad, that would be a landing. So I couldn't tell you exactly what a lift is, but I would say, do you think on a deck?
Maybe.
Yeah, let's go.
There's like an accessibility issue or something that will lift.
Okay, so somewhere where you would land from a deck.
Or a dumbwaiter, if you didn't want to like carry
Yes,
all your stuff for
absolutely.
really no.
Yeah.
Have a
So,
bunch of right.
there on the screen now as an example, this is Brookview Court, which is obviously within the Brookview project. You can track along the 25-foot setback, so it's the 2 tiers totaling 50 feet, and then how they track along the property. So the bluff obviously changes, so one lot might have no bluff, while lot 3 here has a pretty significant impact, so we track along the topography to make sure that the bluff is being protected. So it's not ever a straight line, and you have to train your eye a little bit to track where those lines are, but something that comes in with each plat and building permit at the time of home construction. Something we've started, I would say, fairly recently is that we have really dialed into our conservation signage. So this is Hawthorne Ridge, this is Redmond Drive, which is another property that has bluff with some city stormwater ponds. The red squares on each lot corner are conservation signage. So we have these in Meridian Fields, Oak Tree, Meadows of Spring Creek, Hawthorne Ridge, Brookview, etc. Areas that are within what we call a conservation area. And the signs get put in typically before a home is constructed. So if you go out to see a new construction home in a development, these signs will be there. So you know that there are some restrictions to what can happen beyond the signs and an expectation of what it might look like long term. So this is a picture of one of the signs that's in Meadows at Spring Creek. So showing that it's a conservation area. Something that we want to note at a staff level is that these are conservation areas that the city manages, so it doesn't mean that no work will ever occur in them, but it shouldn't be resident work. So it might be a stormwater pond, so you might see public services out there doing like a maintenance pass around a stormwater pond or maintenance on a pond. So this doesn't mean stop, nothing happens beyond this sign, but it means that the work should be done only by the city, so our residents shouldn't be in there removing trees or doing significant mowing. So these things are things surrounded by drainage systems, stormwater ponds, and bluffs primarily. A request by council at the August 4th meeting was to take a look at other cities' bluff ordinances to see where we fall and if we fall similarly to others. So Jordan has a similar tiered setback of 50 feet. Christy, you mentioned Bloomington at the April meeting, just knowing that there's some bluff property there. The application is really similar, but they have a really specific 760-foot elevation that you can't go below. So a lot of it was similar.
Tell me what that means exactly. Like,
So looking at a topo map, you would find the 670 elevation, and you can't build below it anywhere in Bloomington on a bluff.
okay.
So they maintain, I suspect the bluff is pretty constant. Like it's not a rolling hill area, it's just a constant bluff. So if you fall below the 760, you cannot do construction.
So you
in
can
that
build it
area.
on the top of the hill,
Correct.
just not below this. That seems hard for me to understand why that would
Yeah,
be.
and it might be completely
It's probably
different,
the
it might be,
River Valley.
yeah.
Okay.
It's a lot more consistent.
Yeah. Winona, my lovely hometown with very bluffy topography, a similar definition, calling it 18% slope, which we do the same with a 50-foot setback. So we have the same application as Winona. Chanhassen is a little different, where their full bluff setback is 30, where ours is 50. The state bluff ordinances for wild and scenic riverway in the Mississippi River corridor is 40 feet. Shorewood is 20, Minnetonka is 30. So I would say we fall in the ballpark with application and definition, but I would say cities take different approaches to the setback, ranging from 50, so Jordan, Winona, us, Carver, and then some others that have a bit reduced setback, Minnetonka, Shorewood, Chanhassen, etc. So the council requests to look back at conditional use permits that have been applied for and approved. I'm very grateful for whoever made this strange binder in my office of conditional use permits. Going through, there was a few in the early 2000s, we haven't seen any since. So 2002 was for construction of Carver Ridge Second, which is in the Bluffs. 2002 also saw one on Butternut Circle where there was a deck encroachment. 2003 was for construction of Carver Creek 7th, which is also in the Bluffs. In 2005, again, Carver Creek construction, also in the Bluffs. Sorry, I should say the Bluffs neighborhood. I shouldn't just say the Bluffs. So several of them were just for grading within the 50-foot bluff setback for new home construction. So next steps, where we would like to take this. We have found that the ordinance functions well in practice. Developers take a look at the information. If it's a bluff property, we typically send them there first to take a look at our ordinance and then apply it to a project. At that point, during the planning process, staff reviews the Tier 1 and Tier 2 setback to ensure buildings can fit there, and that often includes some type of deck or patio structure. Staff reviews surveys at the time of building permit to ensure that the home complies with the bluff ordinance. So if you saw that Brookview line that tracks, that comes through at each survey. My recommendation tonight would be, as the Planning Commission continues work on the zoning code, there's an opportunity to cut jargon in that section. Erin and I have been on the phone a couple times reading sections out loud that are challenging because they're just really technical, and if we don't get it, I don't think anyone, like a general Carver resident, can read that and figure out what they could do. So our suggestion would be to cut jargon but keep the general intent and function of the bluff ordinance.
Can I have some clarification on the slide before this? And maybe you said it and I missed it. So these are the ones that were approved.
Correct.
But are there more that have been applied for? And this is just the ones that are approved? Because this,
Yes.
this doesn't tell me if
Yeah,
we
I
have
would-
multiple ones.
From being on the planning commission, yes.
Yeah, yes, what?
Yes, I remember others that were applied for,
And
that were
then
denied.
Okay.
So they weren't in that binder.
Okay.
But yes, this was just the approved.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
I know my neighbor had one declined.
What was that?
My neighbor across the street had one
I
declined.
remember that one specifically. I think there were others though, but.
Okay.
And at that point, a conditional use permit goes before the planning commission and the city council, so it wouldn't be a staff decision if a CUP gets approved, requires a public hearing, goes through the process. You would likely be the decision maker.
If the planning commission were to deny it, would it still come to us?
It would.
It would, okay.
Yep.
And that's the way it's always been?
Correct.
Thanks.
Any other questions, comments?
I have a few, but I didn't know.
Yeah, go.
Do it, okay.
I have a few too, but
Okay.
go ahead.
So when we look at this for the PRD and it says that the PRD is allowed more flexibility, why is the PRD being treated any differently from other developments that might come in?
I would say a project that has a bluff within the area of the project most likely would come in for a PRD because they might be requesting a smaller lot size to be able to keep a bluff in an outlot. So I would say, I can't say why it was drafted the way that it was, but I can see the reasoning that potentially if there was a bluff on a property, it's likely a good idea to move forward with the PRD, so the lots can be smaller than necessary if they need to be, so you can keep the area in conservation, likely in city outlot if it is a bluff, but.
But if they were going to
speculation.
make larger lots, then you would have probably even less bluff issues if your lot was even larger.
So I would say moving forward, I know that the bluffs looks really different than like Hawthorne Ridge and Brookview does, but if there is an active bluff on a property, the city would likely want to hold it under city ownership. We likely wouldn't extend property through a bluff just because it creates more opportunity for people to mishandle the property. So agreed, like the bluffs look really different. Those lots are really large. I would say formally right now, if a project came through on that same piece of property, I think the lots would look really different than they do.
Okay. Yes, okay. But however, the Bluffs is a very great neighborhood.
Mhm.
It's very unique. I like the way it was built. So,
And I don't think it would look differently construction-wise, like the setbacks I think would be the same.
Okay.
I think that we would just hold the area that we know to be a bluff in city outlot.
okay.
We do the same thing for now, for stormwater ponds. There is a period where you'll see people have, I think it's in Spring Creek and in some other areas, Copper Hills, where your lot would go all the way through the stormwater pond.
Mhm.
So like, on paper, your lot is big, but in the physical, like, use of it is the same. It's just through the PRD process. Instead of having, like, you or me own part of that stormwater pond and deal with all these kind of weird documents to provide access, it can be put into an outlot. And that way, I can't go to Aaron and say, well, you're telling me I can't treat the pond that's on my property with this chemical? It creates a standard where someone has to go in for a permit. It's the city's pond to maintain. It just kind of cleans everything up.
We've had an issue with that too. Copper Hills, the lots extend through past the ponds, and Timber Creek came in and they wanted to use some of the pond capacity in Copper Hills, but since they were privately owned, they were really restricted, so it created those ponds for that development only, and it limited what Timber Creek could do. So that's one example where we learned from that, and we likely will never do it again because it's created some nightmares for us.
In the bluffs where I live, the people who live on the bluff, their lots go all the way.
They do.
They do, and so I sense that it probably caused concern as people were trying to build accessory structures or decks or things like that, or landscaping, right? Because there isn't that line, no, this is outlawed, right?
We also, I remember during Hawthorne Ridge approval, there was a lot of discussion that if there was a slough in a bluff on someone's private property, like in the bluffs where the lots extend, it would be that homeowner's responsibility, which could be several hundreds of thousands of dollars. Or if we hold it in outlot, it's the city's responsibility at that point, so we take that liability on instead of a private homeowner, which I think is,
Makes a lot more sense.
yeah.
We also had a scenario about 10 years ago where we had someone build like a patio that like really adjacent, like literally adjacent, touching the stormwater pond. It's a stormwater feature. And because it was part of their property.
Right.
And so that, again, cleans it up on paper, but physically, to your point, it'll look the same.
And then my final one is when we're looking at the setbacks as we compare our bluff ordinances to the other cities, if we can flip back to that slide. So I've heard over my years of being in Carver, the kind of heartache that comes with the bluff ordinance, and then, that it's too restrictive, people, developers, homeowners, it's too restrictive. I understand conservation-wise, but the reason I brought up Bloomington is because they do have very unique housing developments there. Now, granted, some of these were done, in the 70s and the 60s. But I think when we're looking at Carver, I think we have some unique opportunities. I think we've taken some great advantage of some of those too. But I myself have thought that the bluff ordinance may be a bit restrictive. So when I'm looking at, especially the state bluff ordinance for the scenic riverway, how did that one get included?
Honestly, I was Googling Minnesota bluff ordinance.
Okay, that was good. Okay. Well, I'm saying the state has it at 40 feet, right? So the state's at 40 feet. Shorewood, Minnetonka, they're water-bound areas as well. So they have a much shorter width for their bluff ordinances. I would actually be in favor of looking at reducing it a bit, not down to 20, but reducing it to possibly 40, looking at somewhere in that range, to see if we can get, again, some of that uniqueness and interest in these lots that we're providing. I don't like the big, basically the crash and burn across and throwing up house after house that looks exactly the same, lot that looks exactly the same. So that is my personal views, that I would like to look at what that would mean for us if we were to reduce it down 10 feet.
All right.
Can we ask a
But we don't know. We don't know if that would have enabled any of the rejected applications, because that's not in your file.
Well, and it also, each CUP is looked at by the group of people that are there at the moment, so it's different than a variance where you have to be able to check a box to meet the criteria.
Right.
So I would say a CUP is a tool that's a little bit more subjective.
Can you clarify this for me and maybe the council? In like the rear setback for a property right now, where first thing 30 feet?
It ranges, but 25 to 30 usually.
So the changing of the bluff ordinance, would that, when I think about it, that this, it's not impacting the home or the character of the neighborhood. This is really how far, how big your deck could be in the back, or could you have a pool, or where you put your shed. Am I seeing this? And if that's true, like, I just want to get a line of sight for what you're trying to accomplish.
If we go back to this map that we were looking at here, lot 4, and I remember this discussion happening during, when this development was coming in, and this is a problem. We had a lot of talk about what's gonna happen when these homeowners, again, we, as people who look at it at this level, understand you can't do that. Is the realtor going to make sure and relay that when they're looking at selling the house? But if we had reduced this, that would give this person the ability to have something behind their house. And again, I don't think, to me, that it degrades the whole development if this person was to be able to have something, but because of the way we have it written now, they can't put anything on the back of their house.
So I want you to remember that these are not houses. These
The
words
building
are
pads,
not
yes.
houses. So someone could choose a house that is 10 feet shallower and then they can have a deck.
But the developer's gonna put, these are not, I'm forgetting the word, where you choose your own house site. The developer's gonna come in and put in the house styles that they have, correct? Like that they've shown us?
No, Brookview is coming in with you can bring a builder.
Okay. Because what happens is developers, and we see this in every development that comes in, basically do what they can to build that house as big as that building pad.
And I will say, this is the first, no, it's not. The conservation signage is going to go in there before someone comes out and picks a home plan. So someone will look at this lot, recognize there's a conservation sign there that says, I can't do anything beyond this, and then maybe make a different choice if a deck is their be-all, end-all decision maker.
So where would the sign be if the sign goes in? Is it gonna be on that line?
Yeah.
Not the second one, the first one? Where will the sign be? If you can put the arrow. Is the sign going to be right up against the
I can't
building
remember if
pad?
it's on the tier 1 or tier 2 or
I think it tracks the tier.
tier 1.
Let's get back to those.
Yeah.
Yes.
What was that?
I don't,
We have to get back to you on where, if we put it on the tier 1 or tier 2.
Okay.
Just for clarifying, we'll process whatever the council does. I just wanted to clarify, because I wanted you to get what you're looking for out of that 10 feet difference, and if that's, if what you know now changes your opinion of whether it's 40 or 35 or 25.
It doesn't?
I just want to make sure that you're getting what you're expecting if there was a change process.
No, I appreciate all the explanation. It doesn't necessarily, and outside of just this, I think it gives homeowners a little bit more flexibility of what they can do on their own property that they own, and especially if we're taking out, like the situation in the Bluffs now where you own all the way down to, through the entire hillside, and we're taking that out. And I think this would give, and making that city responsibility, and I think you're giving the homeowner a little bit more flexibility in what they can do in their own property.
Can you check that one?
So,
Yeah,
do you guys have any comments you want to go for me?
I don't disagree with Christie's reasoning there and looking at that. It would have been nice to, if we had the history of applications, know if it would have had any impact. That might have made it a little easier for us. We don't have that. I don't know how we arrived at 50 versus 40. I don't know how many people that would impact. I get looking at this is not the house, that's the building pad. When I went to zoning school with you, what I learned was that, this is the outlier here. So they do have a unique, maybe exception that they could apply for an exception because it touches that. I don't, maybe that is the one that comes and gets special consideration because that's unique to all of those homes. It sounded like that from zoning school.
Yes, anyone on here could apply for a conditional use permit to have.
But that would separate that house from all the others that it touches. But I don't disagree with the logic there.
And I don't think we should have it where we're expecting CUPs to come in, like we want that to be the farthest between.
Have we had any since you've been here?
Right now.
But this would be a CUP, not a variance.
If you wanted to encroach into a bluff setback, you can go through a CUP process.
When a resident would come in and, say, I wanna go encroach into my bluff, is it generally like, what's our kind of coined response? Like, no, we can't. So do they realize the CUP is even a possibility?
Yeah, and I typically try to hear them out, like if they're having trouble with their yard eroding, like in the bluffs when you sit higher, and if your yard is falling away, if it's a retaining wall, absolutely, we can talk about it. If it's a pool that is within both of those tiers, it's likely a no, just based on bluff protection. Some people, like a pool would have a great view of the back of several of the bluffs, but inherently our bluff ordinance wouldn't allow that to happen with the amount of grading you can do. So if it's something for like preservation of property, we hear them out, we typically can find some type of solution. But if it's a large improvement, if someone wanted to do a garage within that tier 1 and tier 2 setback, based on our ordinance saying you can't have an accessory structure there, which a pool typically falls under as well, it's not something that we typically move further with.
All right, so just going through my notes, first of all, I do not disagree with clearing up the jargon in this ordinance, because I was reading it and like, it took me a couple of times, and I clearly don't, it's just not written conversationally, it's not written in a way that can be understood. I think there are two sentences that are mishmashed together, like it's tough, right? Like we always give the example of like, who's sitting trying to go through ordinances on a Sunday afternoon trying to figure this out, and it's really, really hard to figure out just on your couch. So trying to figure that out. Let's see, my sign placement question was answered. So,
I think Aaron has an answer.
yes,
for
go.
Yeah, so for the signage in general, like for Brookview here, it was placed along the tier 1. If there's like lot 1, the top left one, we did place one right where the last tier 2 exited the property, just to kind of, that's where the bluff ends essentially, on the far north end, Aaron. But in general, it's the tier 1 line that gets established with the signage within the properties.
Okay, thanks.
So it's the property line or tier 2, whatever is.
Tier 1.
Tier 1.
Property line or tier 1, whichever is closest to the home.
If the bluff tracks into a property, we put it on the tier 1. If the bluff is just behind the property, we do it on the property line.
Okay.
Or if it's,
Yes,
yeah.
that's what
Whichever
I
is
was
clearly
trying to say,
closest.
but
Yeah, what
yes,
she said is right.
a little more succinctly, thank you.
I cut the jargon.
Then I got a project for you. I think, Christy, I hear what you're saying. I guess I still feel like the Brookview development is pretty fresh in my mind. And the folks who came to us who had concerns about that development were very, very clear that they were concerned about bluff encroachment and where those homes were gonna be in relationship to the bluff. So I think, my experience with the public as far as bluff and bluff ordinance has been really, really limited, but that is like a big highlighted portion of my memory as to those folks saying, but what about the bluffs? Can we put these houses here? We wanna protect these bluffs and make sure that this bluff is taken care of. I think when we're looking at, I also remember, who was the developer for that? Can't think of his name.
Kurt.
When Kurt was in, I thought I remembered him saying something for those houses that are pretty close to the tier 1, so I'm looking at lots 4, maybe lot 7. I thought he mentioned, and this could be different because I know there's been some changes with the builders, but there is a way to have some kind of engineered deck that doesn't require posts. I thought he said something that would almost more hang off the side of the house or almost cantilever off. There are ways around it. I think it's not necessarily one of those things that we need to be, I get your concern, and I get like the realtor is not necessarily sharing things. I don't think it's necessarily a concern with the first generation, if you will, of those future homeowners. it could potentially be the folks afterwards who, maybe they're new homeowners, maybe they don't know bluff ordinance. It's a lot like the folks who build houses and didn't do their homework as to what was gonna develop behind them, right? And they're somehow not educated in the home buying process about that, which I think we've all collectively banged our heads at a little bit, because it's frustrating and is a bummer for those folks. But I just keep going back to all of the folks from that Meadows neighborhood who talked to us about the bluff ordinance. And so if ours is the most stringent, I'm okay with that. And I think, you know, we're also not saying 75 or 80 feet. We're within 10 feet here of our peers and everybody else here. I don't know that 10 feet would really, I don't know that
Well,
the juice
we're
would really
within
squeeze it
20,
through.
I mean, 20, 30, I mean, if you look at the state bluff ordinance and Shorewood, I mean, again, these are water, places with water and bluffs also, Minnetonka, Shorewood. Chanhassen, to me, is a little bit flatter. But then even looking at the state one, I do want to say when we're talking about the development, when all those folks came in to talk about it, I really, with what their goal was, at least what appeared to me their goal was to keep the housing development from going in. I've found from listening to arguments that it was less about preserving the bluff and more about keeping that development from going in behind them, because they had a view of a woods behind them, and that is what they were hoping to keep. And then they won't have that any longer because a development was going in. So I take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. I'm sure there were some who were very concerned about the bluff, but I feel like some of that was also a tool that was used in order to try and combat that development going in as a whole.
Yeah, I don't want to dismiss their concerns. I know that there were a few that might have gotten them in the door, but I think once they got the idea that this is development, it's owned land, the owner can do whatever they want with it, the bluff issue was something that they were very concerned about. So I don't want to wipe away or dismiss those concerns.
I'm not saying I'm dismissing them. I'm just saying that I truly believe that there were some that was probably what they were vying for, was to keep the development out. I'm sure there were some that it was important, but I don't think that covers 100% of the people who came in to talk about that. Okay. No, you had more.
No, that was it for me. Yep. Any other thoughts? Okay, so I'm hearing from Christy a desire to change it. Maybe Eric.
I don't know that I'm opposed to it, yeah.
These will need
It would be
You don't
helpful
have
to
to
know
wait
if any applications would have been impacted by that. I don't know if we're changing ordinance for two people here, so.
I heard no from Joy.
Really, only the simplifying the language, but not
Oh, yeah.
the
Not the
distance of
setback.
the 25 plus 25 feet.
Okay, so I'm hearing a majority that doesn't have a desire to proceed with changing the ordinance. However, I think we probably have, I'm assuming for you guys, 5 thumbs up on simplifying that
Simplification, for
language
sure.
so that you don't need an advanced.
One more
degree.
question, I'm sorry, and I'm sure you said this, we were talking about sloughs in the bluff.
I know,
Yeah.
when you said it the last time, I was like,
Have we actually done that where this 50 feet is now part of the city setback? Are we doing that now going forward, as opposed to having the property owner own that?
Yeah, so like
Okay, so
Hawthorne-
we've already done that.
Yes, Hawthorne
Okay.
Vision for View, we own significant bluff property.
I think that's good. All right.
Okay. We're ready to move on.
Yes.
Okay. Joy's done already. Okay. Item number 5, connection fee program overviews.
Thank you. This one is hopefully a little bit more fun. Not that bluffs aren't.
All your stuff is fun.
no, it's not.
Thank you, but no. So tonight, we're going to go over some connection fee programs that we have that are unique to the city of Carver that we use as economic development tools. So getting the council familiar, answering any questions, and then how we share the information. So what are connection fees? They're fees collected by both the city and other agencies. So the biggest one that we're going to talk about tonight is the SAC fee, which is by the Met Council. There's also city fees. For the Met Council fee, the city is a pass-through agency, so we collect the money for the Met Council and pass it through to them. Our connection fees are set by city council, usually based on the long-term financial plan. So we update them annually with the fee schedule. We have a series of changes for each year that coincide with projects that we're working on. Connection fees cover infrastructure costs related to the city system. So the biggest one I always think about is the water treatment facility. We funded that through connection fees largely. So we needed more water capacity. Our water fees paid for that. And the city has programs for commercial and residential projects to allow some relief for people who are working on projects that might be impacted by connection fees. So again, the biggest one that we talk about is the SAC, the Sewer Availability Charge, which is a program run by the Met Council. It's a one-time fee that a home or business owner needs to pay to connect to the regional wastewater system. So a SAC determination is done by the Met Council. You turn in a couple forms and a floor plan of your business or home that shows what you're going to be using it for, and they come back and let you know how many SAC units you need to pay. So how much sewer will be discharging from your facility. So a thing like a restaurant usually has a pretty high number of SAC units that's required because people are there eating, drinking, using a restroom, where an office might have less if it's a small number of employees in a smaller space. Something to note is that one residential or unit or home or apartment is one SAC unit. So the CDA working on their project, if it's 60 units, they'll need to pay 60 SAC units, so sewer availability charge for each unit. And a business is based typically on the square footage. So an example is that a restaurant requires one SAC determination for every 300 square feet of use.
Does that include outdoor use?
Oh, good question. Not quite.
Did you guys reverse?
So the fees for the Met Council is $2,485 per SAC determination. The city uses that number then for our sewer connection and water connection fees. Did I flip those? Is the water 1,000?
No.
Okay, good. So in total, if you pay one SAC unit, it's $12,661. About $2,500 of that gets passed straight through to the Met Council. The rest stays with the city for infrastructure projects. A project to think about is that Hometown Bank had 5 SAC units due. So take that 12,661 times 5 for their total connection charges.
Can I ask a question then?
Yeah, for sure.
Does having a coffee shop have a different ratio per SAC unit?
It does, yes.
And it did for them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, so a restaurant user versus an office user. So they look at the floor plan, so you need to include things like tables that shows how many people could be using a restaurant, sitting down and using that space. But yes, one space could be half restaurant, half office, half industrial, like it goes by uses for each one. So the economic development tools that we're going to talk about, the Downtown Historic Improvements Program, outdoor patios, assessment of city fees, and the affordable housing fee waiver. So first is the Downtown Historic Improvements Program. So this is for commercial projects that are downtown in our historic district. They can qualify. The city only, so city SAC and WAC charges can be reduced upon completion of rehab or certain construction improvements. 2 local businesses have used this program, so a couple Carver and Getaway Motor Cafe. We include this information in a mailer that goes to residents and business owners in the downtown. So each year they get this information, so if they're thinking about a project and they know they have to do a SAC determination, they could apply for this program. The full SAC fee is always due to the Met Council. So you'll see this on each one of my slides, that roughly $2,500 is not negotiable for us, but we have some flexibility for the city fees. So Cup of Carver, I should have just said Getaway Motor Cafe because I don't know what Cup of Carver did. But Getaway Motor Cafe did a pretty extensive tuck pointing project, and they were able to reduce their city SAC and WAC charges based on the work that they did to the exterior of their building. So I think it was like $18,000 of tuck pointing work that they did not have to pay then in the city WAC and SAC charges. Can you tell me what Cup of Carver did?
Doors, windows, signage, pretty significant project.
All good? Questions on this one?
We don't have a budget for this, a set budget, just case by case.
Correct. The question of the night, do outdoor patios count? The Met Council does include them as part of the SAC determination, but the city does not collect city fees on that area due to the short season. So if you have a large patio, the restaurant was 300 square feet, so if you have a 300 square feet patio, you owe that $2,500 to the Met Council, but you don't owe the city for that space.
That's kind of the Mizzy solution, right? That's what we just,
Yep,
Figured out
Mizzy's,
recently.
and then we'll apply it to hometown.
Okay.
We need to look at their SAC determination to see if it took a unit for them to have a patio space for Bunko Monkey.
okay.
But yes, we'll be applied for to future projects as well.
You know, one question, Joy, you just asked, you know, it's a case-by-case basis, how long ago was Cup of Carver? And this is far and few between that this has been asked for, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
2014, 15, maybe
Okay.
13.
all right, and so 8 years, okay.
The third program, assessment of city fees, again, this is a Mizzy's example. So a business owner can assess city connection fees to their property. Mizzy's did an assessment of 10 years at 0 interest. Again, Met Council fees were required to be paid, but that was a way that they could spread their city connection fees over 10 years to lower the impact day one.
And we put some guidelines around that program, right? Like
Correct.
certain, I forget what we did, like was it square footage? I forget what we put.
There's an assessment agreement that will run with their property, so it's
Yeah.
recorded at the county that outlined some specific conditions for the assessment agreement.
Right, and we would apply those on future
Correct. Yep.
as well.
So if they were to default, remind me, it's on their county, I mean, that's it, going back to that to get
Correct.
covered, okay.
And the fourth program that we have is the Affordable Housing Fee Waiver. So it's a tiered program based on a project's affordability. So it goes on area median income, and the developer is required to pay that amount of the city SAC and WAC fees. So if you're at or below 30% area median income, the developer would pay 30% of the total amount of city fees, all the way up to 81%, which is the typical AMI calculator. A few things that are required for this one is that the units need to be affordable for 20 years, so a developer couldn't come in, get a great deal, and have the units be affordable for 1 year and then turn major profit on the project. Maximum fee waiver is $250,000. Again, Met Council fees are required to be paid. The CDA applied for this program, and they were awarded a fee waiver of $250,000 for their next project that is likely to come in the next few months.
If Met Council doesn't incentivize affordable housing by reducing their,
Not with SAC determination. I would say that there are likely other programs that they could do, but the amount of times toilet flushes or something goes down a drain is likely not something that should be messed with at a Met Council level at least.
Erin, can you remind me, I remember when we had the maximum fee with the $250,000 was the max. Is there like a maximum number of developers we would allow? Like, did we have something where it capped, like, if we had 4 developers come in, we wouldn't be out $1 million?
It was discussed at the time of the
Yeah, I
housing
remember
action
we-
plan, but we didn't come up with like a magic number
Okay.
of we only will do 2 a year.
I think we talked about because we're
Yeah, I
gonna
remember
have to
talking,
review
but I
all
don't
of them,
remember where we
we'd be
landed.
like, hey, sorry, come in next year.
Okay.
We're done, like,
So
we
hit our
don't
max.
have a threshold
Okay.
for any more this year.
So we have that discretion.
Correct.
Okay.
What was your question?
Just as an offshoot of this, we want to talk about the CDA grant that was received for Mizzy's related to SAC. Paying of
Sure.
SAC.
So the CDA, the Carver County Community Development Agency, has a community growth partnership grant. Previously, we've used it for site cleanup at former My Pillow, now Carver Ridge. The maximum grant award is $100,000. Mizzy's applied for that grant via the city resolution, went through city council authorizing that application. And Mizzy's was awarded $90,000 to offset their connection fee program, so they're able to use that $90,000 to cover Met Council fees because the cities were assessed. They could go ahead and pay forward on their taxes to get rid of the city fees. I don't see that happening. But they could cover the Met Council fees with that money.
If I may, Erin made that sound really easy. They were awarded a grant, it just happened. It was not that easy. There were some concerns that were brought up from the CDA about the way that the grants were determined, and Brent and I both went to the CDA meeting a few weeks ago, and Brent advocated so hard for the city of Carver and in turn Mizzy's to get this grant. I was kind of saving it, it's on my updates for tonight, but I can take care of it now, but it was 2 hours of a meeting, of which probably an hour and a half was discussion and advocacy and a lot of back and forth with the commissioners. And there was a point, really like right up until like they had a motion, they struggled to get a second to go through with these grants, and they were other grants for 4 other businesses in Carver County. They had a motion for a long time, they struggled to get a second, and I was sitting there with my fingers crossed when they were doing the vote, because I didn't think it was gonna go through. So it was hard fought.
Hard fought, what was the pushback? What did you have to fight against for an hour and a half?
The pushback was that the commissioners were receiving feedback from a community that hadn't been chosen to receive the grant. There were, I think, 6 communities that applied, 4 were awarded the grants. And they were feeling pressure about the methodology as to how the grants were awarded. Cities submit the grants. Cities also proctor or vote on the grants and figure out who the money is awarded to. That's the way that this process has happened for years and years and years. And this year, after the grant awards were made, there was pushback, and the CDA commissioners were starting to feel a little bit uneasy about it. This was something that was supposed to be discussed, awarded, and finalized in their June meeting. It was tabled for July, and they started out the discussion with a motion to table it until the August meeting. So their meetings aren't recorded, otherwise I advocate it would have been one to watch to give a little bit more background and color commentary, but the sausage making was rough on this one, but Brent did an amazing job for the city.
Kudos to Aaron.
Yes, and Aaron, sorry, I am sorry. Aaron did a lot of the work ahead of time, and it was really a team sport, but it's a bigger win than we got the grant, sounds like.
Okay, any questions on the 4 programs right now? Okay. So through this presentation, we realized that these programs are unique, something that we use in our toolbox, and we talk about them with developers when they come in with a project, but we added a section to the planning page on the city website that highlights the program. So if a developer is looking at our website, looking for the application for a planning request, this information is available so they can at least start thinking about it or ask a question to see if they qualify for any of these programs. So we actively talk about it day one when a business comes in, but we felt that this was more transparent. Something else we can hang our hat on. A lot of these programs are Carver specific and tools that not many other communities have, or they look different. So Carver specific, that we recognize there was a need in a way that we could help facilitate assistance with city connection fees. So it's on the city website. You can point people there if they ever have questions or direct them on over. I'd be happy to talk about any of them.
Questions, comments?
Nothing further?
Thank you. Yeah. Great. City manager's report.
It just took a second for me.
Fun fact while I'm doing this.
You don't have to.
You asked for the information.
Oh, shoot, oh, no.
Never mind.
Asking for that tidbit that you asked for 6 months ago.
The city council in January of 2003 was the last time they
Okay.
increased their pay, and at the time, the mayor was making $150 per meeting plus 75 for additional meetings, and the council was $100 per meeting plus 75 for additional meetings.
You said 2003?
2003.
That's a long time.
You just thought it was
Slowly
gonna be a
meeting
poor
phase.
dad joke, didn't
I wanted to make sure you had enough time.
you?
I wanted to let you cram it in.
All business tonight.
Let's see, okay, so software upgrades, we've talked a little bit about this, but our accounts payable, our billing, our community development software, our timesheets, et cetera, all going through upgrades. The whole team has been crushing it. I want to especially call out Brenda Efta and Kathy Elke. Everyone's been doing a lot of work. They've been doing a lot of work, but a lot of intricate detail with theirs. And just thinking about their career path, knowing that both of them are retiring. In Brenda's case, like in a few months, and Kathy in less than a year, the enthusiasm and the patience and the dedication towards making sure that this is done the correct way for us now and into the future is really something to be in awe of, because there'd be a perfectly understandable reason to say, I don't want to deal with this, have the next person do it. And so great work by Brenda Efta and Kathy Ilke. Kind of the real nitty gritty of this is, we are taking a lot of phone calls related to questions, and we're expecting that. So if you think we have any blind spots, or you hear conversations in the community where we can get additional information out, please let us know. We do think a lot of good work is just happening by just having them pick up a phone, because every case is a little bit different, and we can provide the detailed follow-up that most folks need to get them on their way. I think the biggest thing that I want to emphasize is that if you have an ACH payment, something that's taken directly out of your checking account for your bill, you don't have to do anything. A lot of folks got emails letting them know they can view their bill online or sign up to pay in a different way. But their existing payment method, if they have an ACH withdrawal from their bank, checking account, etc., that is in effect, and they don't have to do any additional work to make sure that still happens. Chad let me know that the park and pedestrian underpass cameras are in and looking at installation. Chad, would you just mind sharing with the council how that technology works? Like, are you able to, is it like a motion camera? Are we able to go back and do DVR related to that?
I would say it would be like a Ring camera, but for remote locations. So it's cellular, it's solar, so we don't have to do any infrastructure upgrades. There are a lot of cool pieces on the app where you can monitor it from. You can do alarms after 10 p.m. You can do motion sensors. You can do, there's a lot of technology on the app, but basically it's just 24-hour video surveillance.
Is it a camera? Is it, I know I asked Brent this when we met the other day. Is it something that somebody can like knock down, or is there a cage around it?
We're going to mount them on strategic locations, typically like a utility pole, city-owned light pole. So
You have to scale the light pole.
yeah, they're gonna have to be really tall.
Not so bad, yeah. Okay.
So they'll be outside the underpasses.
Yes,
Okay.
looking
Into them.
into.
Okay, trying not to give away our
Is it-
strategy, sorry.
Right.
Recording, constant recording, event recording, no recording, what is it?
It's constant recording. It's
For
stored in the
24
cloud.
24 hours. Got it.
How long do they keep that info?
I think it's indefinite.
Okay.
Because it's cloud storage. It's
Okay.
Will we have signage saying,
yes.
okay.
Yep, we're working on it.
Under
right now.
surveillance.
Okay. I think that'll be half as
Oh, I think
effective
sure.
as the
Deterrent.
cameras.
Deterrent.
Yeah. That's
Mhm.
awesome. Thank you. Thank you for moving on that sooner rather than later.
You're welcome.
This is a item that I would typically want to have as a separate agenda item, because it's been such a kind of moving target over the last few days. Wanted to get this in front of the council. So as you know, we've been working on a building project for the fire station expansion for their SCBA storage, their self-contained breathing apparatus to get that out of the diesel exhaust, and then storage for public services. The council approved that to go to design development from concept. We got an update, I think it was last Wednesday. And initially we had a concept phase estimate, and this is project cost. So this is construction and your 20% in soft costs for architects, engineers, attorneys, etc. We got construction costs that were quite a bit over what we had planned for in concept phase. There are a variety of pieces that we're still frankly trying to kind of go through and understand why. One of the big pieces is a real big overshot on the building addition for the fire station, as you can see here. So one of the things that we're asking for support on the council is to go back to the concept phase and look at building materials, construction type, etc. One of the things that has also become apparent through the process is there is some constraints related to the overall size of the site. And as you know, I think Aaron's provided a couple updates. We've been looking at a site to the south of the fire station for a possible land expansion, possibly just, it was kind of, the impetus was for the development of Creekside Park at the former wastewater state plant site. We have a lot of outdoor storage, of trying to find outdoor storage in another area closely adjacent to the site. Well, that process has moved along to the point where within the next, I would say, 30 to 60 days, we could have a closed session with the council to discuss appraisal information, offer possible counter offer, and give you some materials for you to review. But with that in mind, which was a dynamic that wasn't considered at the time of concept, if you remember, when the concept was developed, the council asked for plans to be made on site on a property that the city already owns. And so that in and of itself kind of constrained the overall size that we're looking at. But with this kind of new option and considering the design development estimates, we think that there's an opportunity to pause, reassess, look at the data that we received from the construction estimates that Wold received, and then look at the possibility of creating more of a campus for fire department and the public services department. And I mentioned this to Councilmember Hirschman during a recent update. Well, one of the council's goals in the street plan was to not retrofit sites. And so, don't build a public services vehicle storage building that in 3 to 5 years you're gonna say, we need another, again, as big. And so really wanna kind of measure twice, cut once on that overall size, and then considering the acreage that we might be able to pick up, seems like there's an opportunity there. So again, a lot of information, a lot of new information, but if there is one, I'd be looking for some support or feedback from the council if you're willing to go back to Wold and say, okay, let's think about our concept differently, and then two, if there's any additional feedback that you'd want me to take to our design group as we take those next steps, assuming that you'd want us to kind of look again at the project fundamentals, if you will.
I think if there's an opportunity to acquire that adjacent property, having a campus makes sense. We talked about this in the meeting. It's too small for really a community use feature. I'd asked about someday in the future when we have a community center or a pool, it's too small for anything like that. And we're going to need a bigger fire department as the city grows. So I think having that existing building expand into a larger fire department makes sense. So if there's an opportunity to put a public works building on that adjacent property, I think we right size it to the future of Carver. At least we explore that. I support that.
Yeah, when I'm looking at these numbers and from the concept to the development, we're almost $2 million off. That's a big number. I'm not quite sure how that got so off, but being that and we'll just leave it at that, that's a big off. I hope that we don't see big off numbers like this in the future because it's really hard for planning. And then to come back, and if we didn't maybe have the opportunity to look at new plans now and look at something new, I mean, are we stuck at trying to find $2 million? So I think that we should go back to the drawing board. I was never overly thrilled with how it was going to fit out for future expansion on that. So if we have the opportunity to possibly pick up some more land, I think we should definitely wait and explore that. So I'm all for, let's go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I support it as well. And just looking at that parcel that's adjacent, it just doesn't seem like we're taking it away from any other good investment ideas, right? because I know it's commercial, right? But to really access it along JCP there, you'd need a frontage road or something. I mean, I just think it's a goofy place. So if we can better utilize it for a campus environment, maybe offer some more potential future services. I was mentioning things like, we did the brush drop off at the park and ride lot. We could do it there, right? I mean, there could be some potential there. We have a bigger campus site for some other services or capabilities. So I like the idea of going back and seeing what else we could do.
Very similar. I support pausing it. I like what Eric said, where we need to right size. And this is good that we can do that. Pause it, take a step back. Just reevaluate options.
I agree, all of you with the exception of Eric maybe might remember that when we first started talking about the fire station expansion, I was like, let's do it yesterday, let's get shovels in the ground, let's get it done. I still feel really, really strongly about that, and it's just a firefighter safety component that I would like to see that done sooner rather than later. But, to quote Brent, like, measure twice, cut once. Let's do this right. There's really, no reason to rush through this process. This is gonna be a really big project for the community, and let's make sure that we're using our funds appropriately and make the best investments we can.
And to the point Councilmember Mock brought up related to, we want to get into that diagnosis of concept phase to design development, because we'll have another concept estimated cost, and there shouldn't be an assumption that that's going to increase by $2 million or whatever. Because we were adding, somewhere around 18% per year from when the concept plan was adopted in 21 to design development in 23. So 18% in 2 years. And so I understand there are some wild conditions in the construction industry. And you're going to see your estimate on construction costs be high, because they don't want to have you get that, and then your bids come in higher. But the difference, I always want to say delta, because Larry Harris used to say delta, but no one else in the world uses delta. But the space between that 4 and 6 is too big, and so we want to do our due diligence to understand that, and then communicate that back out to you, so that that same kind of gap doesn't occur again between concept and design development. All that said, we're going to be in a position where we're going to want to review and revise our project schedule for this, and maybe it happens in phases where if we're in a position the council supports buying land, maybe that happens first, securing that, and then as we move forward through concept, then you do design development and construction in the preceding or the following year, in 2025 or 26, whatever that works out to. So just wanted to set expectations and make sure that there's support for that concept.
Yeah, I think I hear 5 thumbs up, right?
Yeah.
And then the final thing, as the council knows, there's been a number of speeding concerns throughout the community, and as I was putting this together, there are some common characteristics of the 3. So we had, and I forgot Al's name, but Al McColeman on Main Street, kind of a collector. We had the gentleman who lives next to the water treatment plant on Mount Road, and then we had the neighborhood in Spring Creek on Spring Creek Drive. And so all those streets fundamentally have some similar characteristics. And then rather than approaching those individually, are there some common criteria that the council could use in explaining a process to implement digital speed signs throughout the community, if you're supportive of that? And so rather than it having a feel of whoever asks for it gets, developing a criteria again proposed that looks at, located on city streets, that they're 2-lane sections, that they operate as a collector and not necessarily a neighborhood street, and then defining what those existing roads are in our state aid system, and then future state aid roads as our system grows, phasing that in over 5 years. So part of it could be budget, but part of it could be construction. So when we redo this section of Broadway, Main, 4th Street East and Old Carver Road. A couple could be installed when we do the 4th Street project in 2024, could be installed. So I put together with the team a concept for proposed locations. So the yellow are existing, and think about it in these instances, like the existing on Spring Creek Drive through that straightaway, that old section of US 212, that is eastbound. So the red circle or dot to the west of that would be a westbound. The yellow on JCP is that school zone. So that's intermittent. It's not going continuously, but as you can see here, it follows that same track. There's one on Ironwood just west of the school, a couple on Mount Hope, and then one coming in on Main as you come into the downtown from Chaska, and then two on 4th Street, one eastbound, one westbound, and then another one as you're coming into downtown Carver from the west. The yellow is existing. We have both east and west bounds on 6th Street West that were just installed as a part of the 6th Street West reconstruction project. So again, this is a big concept, but trying to get some discussion and feedback and direction from the council on how you want to manage this. It seemed like the folks on Spring Creek Drive are wanting a digital speed sign. And so the idea is to try to make this a community or city policy as opposed to individual requests.
Spring Creek is not considered, is it considered a collector all the way through?
Yes, well, it has features of a collector, and we're trying to get it into our state aid road system at some point.
Okay.
Because I wanna be respectful of our time,
Yep.
but give us enough room for discussion. We can, either I'll give it a thumbs up right now, or we can discuss it during our meeting a little bit later on. How would you guys wanna proceed?
Can we touch on it at the end of the meeting?
You're okay with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
You're in
Yes.
charge.
Okay.
No.
Okay, good, then, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Councilmember McKnight. I'll second. Second by Councilmember Smith. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, thank you. Sorry for the abrupt